Welcome back to 4 Geeks by Geeks, where geeks come to geek out. My name is T, and I'm here to tell you about a criminally unknown RPG called Print Weaver by N.L. Morrison. This game came out in March of 2022, and immediately it caught my attention, but I could never get my hands on it. It was constantly sold out. I finally did, and now I'm here to tell you how to play this game and tell you all about this absolutely incredible character creation system. In all of my TTRPGs that I've played and experienced, this is by far the most creative and my favorite. I do need to preface this by saying this is a Souls-like TTRPG, but I need to follow that up by saying while it is going to be a little bit more difficult than other TTRPGs that you play, I think it is still a very good beginner-friendly game because there is a revive feature that is really going to allow characters to kind of open up and play into this character without the fear of losing out on an adventure and getting too embedded into a character that they fear they're going to lose and not really play their heart out for the fear of death. In other TTRPGs, death is usually the end of your adventure. In Print Weaver, it's just another day for these travelers. Character creation in Print Weaver is, I think, one of the most creative and my absolute favorite way it's ever been done, because it's truly playing a character based off yourself, completely original to you. And I just think that's absolutely fascinating because it takes away a lot of the stress and the pressures of playing all these other TTRPGs that just simply have too many options to pick from. What are the benefits? What are the cons? What meshes well together? You don't have to worry about that. This is a game truly designed based off of you, where you can just jump straight into the adventure. So how do you create your character? First and foremost, get your fingerprints nice and dusty, put them onto a sheet of paper. I tried this with Sharpie, highlighter, pen, and maybe it's just my old age and poor eyesight. The only thing I had really good success with figuring out my prints was just ink pads that you can pick up at your local hobby store for $1. Much easier way to get your prints read. My better half was able to just look at her fingerprints and note what she was looking at. I did not have that luck. So how do you create your character? Stats and creation are based off of 4 different fingerprint identities: loops, arches, whirls, and obscurities. So this game accounts for those individuals who may be missing digits or burned off their fingerprints because they robbed a bank and didn't want themselves identified. How that breaks down is loops are going to be equivalent to your strength stat. Arches are going to be determining of your will stat, whirls are going to determine your dexterity, and obscurities, while they don't give you any attribute points, they do give you much cooler classes. But I'll get into that in just a little bit. When determining how that breaks down, I'll use my fingerprints as an example. I broke down to loops and arches, 0 whirls, 0 obscurities. So counting these out, I had a total of 6 loops, giving me a strength of 6, 4 arches, giving me a will score of 4, and 0 dexterity. Didn't need the game calling me out on that one. When it comes to your vitality or your hit points, that is based off of a D10 plus your strength score plus your dexterity score divided by 2. This example, I rolled a 6 on my D10, 6 on my strength, giving me a 12, 0 dex divided by 2, doesn't exist. We throw that out the window. And just like that, I have the basis of my character. Now, how does that translate into what your character is? Because you haven't picked a race, you haven't picked a class. And in this game, there aren't really either of those things. You are simply a traveler. I like the idea that you were just these print weaving entities, kind of ambiguous, but it can kind of just really depend on the flavor that you want to go with for this one. As for classes, I call them classes. A few of the people I've kind of spoke with disagreed with that statement, but when you're determining the items that your character has, it's based off of loops, whirls, obscurities, and arches, and then your digits matching. And what I mean by that is both of my thumbs are LL, so loop loop. So when I determine what my item was based off my thumbs, I would then look at the gifts of the loop. With the gifts of the loop, with my thumbs being LL, I carry plate mail, which counts as heavy armor. My index fingers and my middle fingers were both arches, which gave me a boomerang, which counts as a light weapon and is returned to this wielder when thrown. My middle finger gave me a tome containing 5 scrolls. Then my ring finger and my pinkies, going back to the gifts of the loop, give me a ring of strong, meaning 2-handed weapons and tomes only require 1 hand to wield. And my pinky finger gave me a silver chalice, which tarnishes when in the presence of monsters. So those are the items that my character would have on them. My class description, in my opinion, would make me a mage knight. And I think I like determining what a class is because it helps you give a better mental idea of what your character is going to look like and be capable of based off of your print markings determining these things for you. Outside of that, class and race really doesn't play into anything because everything else is just going to be based off roleplay and your stat allowances when it comes to rolling your die. Now, I think the strangest thing about this game and what makes it so unique is most games nowadays are based on a D6 or a D20. NL Morrison thought, hey, let's just go right down the middle and let's play with a D10, which I never thought I'd play a game with a D10 because D10s are not the most common dice to... You can go out and buy individual D6s and D20s. D10s are a less than common die, so the likelihood that you have enough of these on hand is probably slim to none unless you play other TTRPGs and you've become a dice hoarder like myself, and then you have enough for you, your table, and 6 other tables that have enough dice that they need. This game uses an obscurity rating as compared to armor class like many other TTRPGs do. And I think obscurity rating is a very good term to use in this game because a big mechanic of this game is based off ink and how it interacts with the world. And as I kind of read through Printweaver, I got the obscurity reading as the ink is going to be giving mirages, illusions, and misdirection when it comes to how it interacts with the world and the way monsters and other creatures are going to be able to interact with you. Using my character as an example, using heavy plate mail, that gave me an obscurity rating of 3, which means when a monster were to attack my character, it would have to roll 3 successes or higher to be able to do any damage to me. So how do successes work in this game? Successes work, again, based off a D10 system. You need to roll the probability of 50% or higher. So with it being a D10 system, 6 and above is how you roll your successes. When you're rolling with advantage, that 6 becomes a 5 and above. When you're rolling with disadvantage, it becomes a 7 and above. In those weird instances where you have to roll for a stat that you don't have, my example being dexterity, you're never completely out of luck. You will always be able to roll a minimum of 1d10 with a chance die, and if you manage to get a 10 on that chance die, you just get to keep adding d10s. And that is more or less the basis of what you do to create your character. We'll throw up here my character sheet so you can see a physical representation of what my character sheet looks like and how to read that. The only thing we haven't touched on yet is your carrying capacity. Much like games in D&D where your carrying capacity is based off your strength score, and it's kind of more often than not an ignored thing, in Printweaver, with this being a Souls-like game, the amount of items you can carry is very strict. You get a total of 10 items being able to be carried, period. Obviously, varying things like books and tomes allow you to carry multiple items in a single item, so your scrolls and your books or tomes, but outside of that, everything is going to allot for a slot being taken. Plate mail, for example, takes up 4 slots, meaning my character only has 6 slots available for other items they are able to be carried. To my knowledge, there are no bags, there are no ways to get additional carry slots. This game is going to be a combination of traveling in Pathfinder and combat, very, very Souls-like-esque. This is not going to be a war game where you are going to be fighting hordes of enemies at one time, because the level of difficulty that would force is absolutely insane, unless you're into those types of games, and then more off to you. I am not. I like playing these games to be able to be the hero. I want my players to be the hero. So me personally, when it comes to the encounter portion of this, it is going to be much more in the realm of what Powered by the Apocalypse does, where you have one or two creatures, a big powerful creature kind of showcasing and rolling out what they're going to be doing before it happens, to really give your players the chance to understand what is being telegraphed and be able to work around that so they have the capabilities of succeeding. Combat is still fairly straightforward, with some minor differences coming to just terminology being used in the game. Like most games where combat takes place, you will always roll initiative, but this is going to be side-based, not individual-based. So as previously stated, when it comes to successes, when you roll for your initiative, you are rolling your dexterity, and you are looking for 6 and above for your successes. It is going to be a total tally, so if your party rolls 5 total successes when it comes to the dexterity, and the enemy party rolls 3, your party will move entirely before the enemy party will get a chance to retaliate. Each character will get 1 movement action, 1 action, and then obviously free actions are anything that can be done in just a matter of a few seconds. Your movement is based off of your dexterity score plus 3. And when it comes to combat, this is where the game is going to get much more ambiguous than technical. In Printweaver, you have 3 ranges: engaged, hand-to-hand combat, close, in proximity, and then distant. Your weapon capabilities are going to be based off of the overall ambiguity of where you think your character is in relation to these other things. I personally will still be running my combats based off of maps, because theater of the mind is not something everybody is capable of, but these are things to keep in mind when you're describing the actions you want to take place without being disappointed or discouraged if something you are wanting to pull off may not facilitate based off of the game mechanics. But a plus note of that is, with this being so ambiguous, communicate with your game master. You're going to be able to do a lot more than less, because this is just going to be a more fluid and roll with the punches type of gameplay and combat. When it comes to attacking, you don't roll any damage die, you just roll your hit die. The amount of hit die is equivalent to your stat plus the allotted die amount to the type of weapon you are using. Using my character as an example, I have a strength score of 6, allowing me 6d10, in addition to a heavy weapon being 3d10, would allow my character to roll 9d10 to hit. So how does damage work into play? So if we are playing with an obscurity rating of 3 on this monster, say I rolled 6 out of 9 successes, 3 of those would be disregarded because of the obscurity rating, meaning my character hit for 3 successes. 3 of those hit, knocking that monster's vitality down by 3. Now, a very key important thing that differs between monsters and travelers in this game is how damage is taken. When a traveler fights a monster, when they do damage straight to the monster's vitality. On the flip side, when a monster attacks a traveler, unless stated otherwise, damage goes to the strength stat before it goes to the vitality. While I think that is incredibly cool because it's a good emphasis on showing battle fatigue and getting weaker as the game and fight progresses, it can also then throw off your ability to really beat those obscurity numbers, is where the Souls-like aspect of this game really begins to shine through in the level of difficulty. Because the moment my character starts taking that damage, I'm no longer rolling 9d10s, then it's 6d10, and then once I'm out of strength, then I'm just rolling that 3d10 for my weapon. So again, this is something that I myself find incredibly fascinating, but others could find very frustrating. But a reminder, this is a Souls-like game, so it is intended to be more challenging than other TTRPGs are. While there is no damage specific in this game, crits still are capable of being rolled, and crits are simply happening if you roll a 10. Everything is going to kind of be varying based off the weapon you're using. If you're using just a physical weapon, it's double damage. If you're using fire-based, that target succeeds a strength check or suffers exhaustion, cold, dexterity check, or restrained. So crits still do exist in this game, which is great because we all love rolling damage die. We love rolling up those big numbers. But again, this game is much more intended to be fluid and quicker combat than other TTRPGs. Now, a big thing in this game is going to be understanding that ink is very important, and there are going to be times when you're fighting monsters with mundane weapons. When it comes to mundane weapons, unfortunately, it doesn't matter what you roll, you're only going to be able to do 1 damage total on your successes. Now here comes another great thing I enjoy a lot in this game. When you're rolling your successes for attacks, if you manage to only meet the obscurity rating, then becomes what the game is referring to as parrying, which is simply attack of opportunities. But there's then a caveat to the parry and attack of opportunity. So if you only meet the obscurity rating, the creature or person or traveler you are fighting will then get the option to parry and do their own attack. However, if they end up failing in that parry, they fall prone. So you win some, you lose some, and I just think it's a very fun way to add a little bit more depth in that engaged tit for tat that's less than, oh, I do an attack, everybody does an attack. It's a lot more back and forth, keeping you more engaged into the circumstance. Much like other TTRPGs, statuses still exist in this game: blindness, deafness, stunned, anything of the sorts. All stats are removed per short rest, but one at a time. Again, this is a Souls-like RPG. This is going to be a lot more challenging. So when it comes to things like resting and getting rid of these statuses, much more time is going to pass as compared to Dungeons & Dragons, where you simply take a short rest, roll some dice, or take a long rest, 4 hours versus 8 hours, and just get everything back. In this game, to get fully rested and back to 100%, you have to rest for 2 weeks in total. Which leads us into the travel portion of this game. Traveling is going to be a very, very big thing in this game, so map making and development is going to be very, very pertinent to this. When it comes to traveling, your character is able to move 4 hexes a day, 1 in the morning, midday, afternoon, and night. Each hex is going to be considered 10 kilometers. Use whatever stat you feel fitting to you. You can travel all 4 in one day if you so see fit, but if you travel all day, you're not resting, and resting is going to be a very, very important aspect of this game. So you don't want to get too cocky. This is going to be a game of caution and reserve, and much less full force sprinting into that good night. If you were to travel all 4 portions of the day, you will take a point of exhaustion, which leads us into, let's not do that, let's set up camp instead. These travelers are traveling into areas that nobody else wants to because it's incredibly dangerous. So with that being said, you must protect yourself at night when you are resting. This is where ink becomes very, very pertinent, because you must cast rituals every night to protect yourself from everything going on in the world, to allow your travelers to rest and begin to heal and rejuvenate themselves. It requires 10 ink per character in that ritual to protect them for the evening. As previously stated, resting is the only way you can heal in this game, but it is only based off of long rests. Resting allowances come into 3 phases: short, long, and full. In your short rest that takes just a single night, you are able to make strength, will, and dex checks to restore those points. A long rest, which takes 3 nights, will autofill your stats back to full, and then you will be allowed to roll a 1d10 to recover vitality. If you do a full rest for the 2 weeks, everything comes back to max. Death is going to be something that is going to happen in this game, is likely going to happen often, but death is not the end for the adventures of these travelers. It is a massive inconvenience, though. If you were to die in battle, your soul will be brought back to its most recent shrine or the last place you rested to be revived by a print weaver. You drop all items excluding any rings and or soul-bound items. Unfortunately, when you are revived, your stats are at 0, your vitality is at 1, so you are very weak and very susceptible to just repeating that loop and dying again. You are able to retrieve said items, but that is going to be a dangerous task, and if it takes you too much time, you will start to lose items. One day, you lose 1 random item. If it takes 2 days, you lose 2 random items. And if you wait 2 weeks to get your items, you lose all but 1 total item remaining. So how do you survive in this game effectively? Well, while you're traveling, you want to be able to make safe havens. So 1, you have your checkpoints, so you have a place to come back that is closer rather than further. And 2, you are still traveling adventures. You are still helping people. There are still other NPCs existing in this world that need your help and need safe places to exist. When establishing your outpost, it costs 100 ink per resident to set up this outpost. Each stone, each brick, each rock must be meticulously marked with ink in the protection of Providence. If a single stone is missed in this mark, this outpost is not safe and these residents will be attacked. Outposts can be turned into shrines, which will allow print weavers to be able to move into these locations so they can revive you, so they can imbue your weapons and or armor, but this requires 1,000 ink to be input into that outpost to become a shrine. So I've mentioned ink several times and haven't explained it yet. Ink is the life force of this entire world. How do you get ink? By slaying monsters. Much like Monster Hunter World, you will be hunting down these monsters to try to bleed them of their ink because you need it desperately to survive. Harvesting ink is a dangerous and time-consuming event. The amount of time is equivalent to the monster's vitality. So if the monster had a 1d10 vitality, it will take 1 day and it will equate to 1d10's worth of ink. If the monster's vitality was based off 2d10, it would take 2 days to harvest, but equating to 1d100 amount of ink. 3d10 equates to 3 days and 1d1000 amount of ink. And then 4d10 equals 4 days and 1d10,000 of ink. So as you can see, these bigger creatures are going to harvest much more, but you are going to be much more susceptible to any wrongdoings or misfortunes coming your way because you're investing all of this time into harvesting this ink. So it's got its benefit and its payoff. You can amass these mass quantities of ink, but each day, each portion of the day that you are out in the world, an encounter table will be rolled. So if you were taking the 4 days to harvest this massive creature, that is 16 encounters you are going to have to be able to survive and exist in to try to get that mass amount of ink. So what happens when you die? Great things happen, in a GM's opinion. When you die, the print markings from your body get whisked away into the air and you are left with your items and an ambiguous creature laying in the depths. What I mean by that is your body has the potential of becoming a printless in a mere matter of 30 minutes if your party does not burn you to ash. So what happens if your body becomes a printless? Oh, let me tell you, because as a GM, this is my absolute favorite thing to do, and that is use you against you. If your body were to become a printless, they become a mirror image of your stats, meaning if you are a min-max character, that min-max monster is coming back to you. Mostly joking. I think printless are incredibly interesting BBEGs because they start out as these just mindless zombie-like creatures that can become these overpowering BBEGs that you must eventually deal with at some point. When it comes to printless, they will mostly just attack whatever comes their way, but they hunger for print markings. They will hunt you down. They will find you. Printless will eat other printless, making more monstrosity-based individuals, or they will continue to eat print marks and become elevated and advance further and further into becoming a problem in this world that they are existing in. All right, so we've talked about the physical aspect of the game. Let's talk about the magical aspect of this game. Magic in Printweaver is handled much differently than other TTRPGs. It's going to be much more similar to a wizard in D&D that has their tomes or their scrolls or their whatever magic booklet they're carrying to cast these spells out of. Printweaver is along that line, excluding the fact that when scrolls are used in D&D they are destroyed. That's not the case in Printweaver. You can use a scroll as many times as you need. But a big thing that I like about scroll usage in Printweaver is the power of the spell is equivalent to how much will you put into it. You can simply use 1 will point to cast a weaker version of the spell. You can use 4 will points to cast a much stronger version of that spell. So when you're rolling for your successes, you are rolling the willpower plus an additional die roll looking for your successes. When casting spells, you're simply looking for 1 unless you are going unopposed, which is going to add some level of an obscurity rating or an obstacle score. For example, if a creature is running at you while you're trying to cast that spell, you may be looking at 2 versus 4 successes as compared to that 1. Scrolls do require a line of sight, but again, scrolls do not destroy when they are used, and they are carried in individual slots, or you can get books and tomes. Books carry 3 scrolls, tomes carry 5 scrolls, and scrolls can be replaced, but they do require a short rest. Obviously, magic exists in this world. If magic exists, magic items exist. So you may not end up with a character with a will score, and that's okay. My character doesn't have dexterity. You win some, you lose some. With that being said, even though you don't have a will score, you are still able to use magic items and magic weapons, because most of them are simply going to have active abilities. Maybe they have a usage charge, but you aren't going to be limited by being able to use these items because you don't have a will score. As previously stated, you always have a minimum of 1d10 when it comes to a stat, even if you have no points in it. Now, how do you run a game of Printweaver? Much like any other TTRPG, the game master is in control and responsible for everything outside of the players. You're responsible for the settings, for the outposts, for the NPCs, for the creatures. Everything that's going on in the world is your responsibility. You're gonna have to prep and set those things up for the characters to enjoy. But also remember, you are going to need to think on your feet, because you do not want to railroad your players. You want them to be able to add to the world so they can feel much more invested and involved. Nobody wants to play at that table where they're just like, this exists, and whatever you say doesn't come into play. That's not fun. Don't be that table head. So specifically, what differs in Printweaver in comparison to those other TTRPGs? Combat is a big thing I want to emphasize here on what you should be doing in comparison to other TTRPGs. In Dungeons & Dragons, a very war-based TTRPG, you are going to be fighting multitudes of creatures and monsters and humanoids in a single setting, because in D&D, you are a much stronger character, more capabilities, more allowance, and a lot easier to survive. In Printweaver, that's not the case. In Printweaver, you much more want to go at this with the approach of a monster of the week style, one super big scary creature and maybe a minion, because it can very, very quickly become overpowering and overbearing for your players. And while this is a Souls-like TTRPG, unless you guys have consented to a table where the DM or the GM is just simply out to kill you, your players need to be able to stand a chance. You have a low vitality, most of the time lower strength stats. It's not going to take much for you to be taken out of the game, and a lot of time is going to pass when you are trying to rest back into full to be able to get back to full power, to be able to get back into these fights. So how do you do that? How do you make it so your characters have a chance to fight back but still be challenging? And that's telegraph. Set up early what you are going to be doing. Give them a turn or two to be able to respond, to react to this, and then if they fail, if they mess up, if they ignore it, then it's okay for that monster to club them into a tree, doing an obscene amount of damage. You set them up to avoid it. If they chose to not heed the warning, that's on them. That's not on you. But with that being said, death is going to be a common occurrence in this game, and if you want any level of progression, setting up safe havens is going to be a very, very important thing for your players to be doing. And this is where you can really allow your characters to kind of shine in what is brought into the world based off of their creations. Technically, per the book, when you're making your safe havens, they are based off the GM's prints. Why do that when you can include your whole table? And when they're setting up those safe havens, go around the table, compare and combine those print markings to determine what is going to be used at that safe haven. Say you are determining your safe haven, and it's going to be based off of your 5 digits again. Thumb, pointer, middle, ring, and pinky. And much like your character, it's based off of sets. Your thumb is going to determine the defenses. Your pointer finger, your index finger determines the landmarks. The middle finger determines its resources. The ring finger determines its patrons, and the pinky finger determines the events. Technically speaking, if you were to make every single safe haven based off of your own prints, you're going to get the same safe havens over and over and over again, and that is going to just result in mundane and repetitive gameplay. So to avoid that, randomly combine the prints of your players at the table so they have a direct involvement of these safe havens being created, so they can feel much more invested in this story and feel like they are making an actual contribution to these societies that they are creating. The last thing to talk about is going to be your encounters. As previously stated, this game is a big traveling game where it is broken up into 4 portions: morning, midday, afternoon, and night. Per the game, every hex you travel is eligible to be rolled for encounter. So meaning every day, technically speaking, you should be rolling 4 encounters, which kind of brings up 2 things here. You either need an ungodly amount of encounter tables, or you don't roll encounters as much. Feed off your tables, see how they're feeling. If they want more encounters, give them more encounters every day. If they're like, man, this is just way too much and we're not able to progress and do anything, take a step back from those encounters. Give them time to breathe, give them time to travel without much happening. Communicate with your players to have the best game possible for everybody involved. And while this is a much more simplified version of how to play Printweaver, hopefully this is going to be a good resource available for anybody that wants to be a player or a GM on how to play. Obviously, we highly recommend going to pick up your own copy of Printweaver, but also at the same time, we know how capitalism works. Maybe you want to be able to play the game with just a simple how-to. While we won't be providing you the PDF, these should give you the basic rules to be able to play on your own and at least get the game going. But here at 4 Geeks by Geeks and Let's Get Rolling, we're always here to support indie developers and up-and-comers. And L&L Morrison, you created a fantastic game, so your link will be listed below for anybody to be able to go support and pick up this game for themselves. You can pick up either the book or the PDF. Thank you for stopping by, and we hope we were able to teach you something new or help clarify something for you. If we got something wrong, please let us know in the comments. So we are human, we make mistakes, we are here to learn, grow, and develop. So if we mess something up, let us know in the comments, so that way nobody else is making that same mistake and they have a quick available resource to let them know, hey, they got this wrong, this is how it's supposed to be. But until next time, my name is T. You guys just keep geeking out. Bye.